Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth video of my British Championship finals. And this game, I am white. I'm playing Bogdan Lalic, who is a Grandmaster, who has been over, I think he's either exactly 2600 or just over it, like 2602. He's won Hastings International Tournament before, and he is sort of known in the chess community in Great Britain as someone who almost never loses games. So on the one hand, this might be rather scary, but on the other hand, he generally values the opening. If he's better in the opening, or even equal, he will often press for a win. But if you can keep the advantage as white, he does sometimes take draws to make sure that he gets results as black, and then he will be ruthless as white and win almost all the games. So as white, I had prepared a very long line against him, which would have been d4, knight f6, c4, and he sometimes plays g6, but he most commonly plays e6, knight f3, d5, and then this line is a Queen's Gambit declined, where I would have played the rather rare bishop f4. This was to try and get him out of his theory. And the main lines, which he has played a few times before, but this is not necessarily saying he'll play this every time, because he has played a wide variety of openings. But I thought that it might go down this line, where he will gain time on my bishop, because I've already moved it, so I have to move it a second time to capture my pawn. Then this a6 with the plan of b5 is often useful for black. I was either going to play a4 here or castle. I hadn't fully decided yet. c5. Now a4. I think actually I've got the mood order wrong. I think I was going to play a4 first, and after c5 then castles. But we would get to this position. Takes, queen takes is a move I wouldn't have considered before booking up on this line. Normally I would do pawn takes and then have a isolated queen's pawn position, but then I think Bogdan would definitely play on and probably outplay me because of his superior middle game ability. And this line he's had once or twice before, where his opponent played bishop e2, which is a fine move, but I think I found an improvement on it. Bishop b3, and then black will remove white's advantage by trading the queens. And this way, even though white's pieces are slightly further forwards, without the queens on the board, the space advantage is minimal at best. And after bishop d7, which is the correct move, I found a nice simplification with a5, knight to d5 in the centre, and then a remarkable knight f5 move, where if he takes my knight, I can grab the d5 knight and his pawns are doubled up. And if he moves his d5 knight, I'll take on e7 with a check. So bishop b4 is the move that's been played once or twice in the past between top master players. But then white grabs the knight, aiming at the bishop on b4, black recaptures, and then white surrenders the bishop pair, giving black a weak d5 pawn, and removes black's edge of having the two bishops with the excellent bishop d6. Whichever way black captures, the evaluation is pretty much equal, but it does give a very slight edge to white. After bishop takes bishop, which is inferior to the other move, white will capture, attack b7, black will improve, and then the key kind of Nimzovich idea is to put a knight in front of an isolated pawn. So there's a rather lovely maneuver, knight f5, then rook e8, stopping knight e7 with a fork. And then I can simply put my knight on d4. There's no way for black to open the e-file without wrecking their pawn structure. And so the c-file is the only one really to think about. And maybe I can take the bishop and still have a equal position, but then black might activate the rooks. So a simple rook f to c1, and here, yeah, the evaluation is about, I think it's 0.2 or 0.3 for white. Even though rooks and bishops work very well together, the the light squared bishop for black doesn't really have a good place to be, and this knight is excellent on d4. So I'd be very willing to have this position against even the strongest grandmasters, and even if I lost, I know that I would have played well up to here, and they would have a tough time breaking me down. And if they do the other move, which is more likely, so in this position, if they play bishop takes knight, I don't take the rook, I take the bishop. So we would now have opposite bishops. Their rook is attacked on f8, so they will put it on the open file. And then a lovely move, rook to d1. And what this does is it forces the black bishop on f5 to deactivate on e6, and then I can play rook to c1. And this position is also a tiny bit better for white, because I can play bishop c5 and then bishop d4, and have a very nice bishop in the centre of the board. But likely a draw, and I think even a very strong player may well take the draw offer if I were to do it here. So I prepared all this stuff for my grandmaster opponent, hoping for a draw fairly early in the game, where I would not have to spend hours thinking hard and then next round going into the game being extremely tired. But he surprised me. In this game, I was out of my book at move 1. He played e6. So I played knight f3, hoping for knight f6 and d5, which would get us back into the line that I had prepped. So after d5, I play c4, hoping knight f6 will be here. But he plays a6, and the move order confused me a bit. If I play knight c3, he can take my pawn, and it's hard for me to get it back. And even though it's okay for white, I really don't like positions where I'm just a pawn down and my counterplay is hypothetical. It's a very long-term pawn sacrifice. I never like those too much. So here I played e3, which is, I believe, the second or third most popular move. What this does is it protects the pawn, and even though it seals in the bishop on c1, there are lines that Boris Avrukh has written in his Grandmaster Repertoire series of d4 openings for white. He recommends e3 early on, and often sealing in the bishop on c1. So I'm not in terrible company with this, and I know that my position can't be that bad. I play knight c3, and Bogdan Lalic does capture because later on he can play b5, hitting the bishop. First he plays c5, and possibly a4 is the most accurate move because it stops b5. And we're in a very similar position to the line I'd prepped, except my bishop on c1 is no longer out, and he hasn't played the move bishop e7. So I'd really want to here to be able to magic my bishop to f4, him to play bishop e7, and then me to play a4, and we'd be exactly in the prep I had arranged. But instead I castle, which is the second most popular move, and b5, and here I surprised myself a bit, because I think I played the best move in terms of playing against a top grandmaster, because if I play bishop b3, he always has the option of playing c4, gaining more time, and then bishop d3, often you want to have your queen or rook on the d-file, so the d3 bishop can be in your way. I played bishop e2, which turns out to be the move with the greatest percentage of results for white, even though it's the second most popular move after bishop d3. Bishop b7. And now apparently I play a little bit inaccurately, according to theory. I should be playing more sort of building up moves, like queen c2, or maybe even b3 here, to fianchetto on b2. But instead I choose to play d takes c5, which is still theory, and if he takes my queen I take with the rook. He chose to take with the bishop, which is the most accurate move. I then capture the queen, and even though his king is in the centre, to be honest, it's not a bad king. He'll just simply put it on e7, and his king is arguably better than mine in the centre of the board. b3, knight b d7, so very flexible for the knight. It can come to e5, b6, c5, and also recapture on f6 if it needs to. Bishop b2. And here I really want this knight on c3 actually to be on d2. So my position is not perfect here, but it still gives white a very tiny edge. He played king e7 to connect his rooks, and then I activated on d1. So here I was thinking I might have a very long game ahead of me. Rook a, c8, lining up with my knight, and the idea for me is to first play rook c1, and then to actually play knight b1, knight d2 in some of these positions, or to play a3 or a4, trying to do stuff on the queen side. But here I thought that I'd got far enough into the game that it might be worth throwing in a draw offer, because he does have a tendency to take draws when he's just a touch worse as black. So I did offer the draw, and he thought for maybe a minute, but then accepted. So I think this was a strategic draw offer for both of us. For me, I got to say that I drew with the Grandmaster, and for him, he got to, play as black, risk nothing, and play a quick game, so he has his energy for tomorrow when he'll be white. And if I turn on the computer, it's probably going to say his draw offer is his draw acceptance is correct, because I suspect, white has an average like 0.1 for white. So he at no point was he better in the game, but I think maybe a more ambitious Grandmaster would have kept playing. But then again, it might have taken somebody 3 hours to win this match as black, even if you play very, very well. And then you'll be exhausted for the next game. So possibly his plan of taking the draw offer to minimise his sort of energy expenditure in order to perform well in the rest of the tournament over the next week is the right decision. Anyway, I'm happy to have drawn. Tomorrow I'm playing against a FIDE master as black, so that should be interesting. All my matches will have been against title players. So wish me luck and see you next time. Bye.